Can we please hear it for Rebecca Acuna? She is phenomenal. You know, when I look at Rebecca, I know our future is bright. I know our future as a country is bright. She is extraordinary. She has been a leader in this campaign. She is someone who walks and talks with confidence, having life experiences and knowing when she walks in that room, yes, sister, sometimes we may be the only one that looks like us walking in that room, having had the experiences that we've had, but the thing we all know is we never walk in those rooms alone. We are all in that room together. So proud of you. How's everybody doing? It's so good to see you, Texas. Bernice, it is so good to see you. I want to first acknowledge all the leaders. Everybody here is a leader. Bishop Spears. Where's Bishop Spears? There. Hello, Bishop. Thank you for welcoming us in such a warm way. Thank you, Bishop. Dee Dee McGuire, I talked to her earlier. Where is she? Hi, Dee Dee. Thank you. Thank you for your show and your voice. Fred Heyman and Marvin Sapp, where are they? Oh, my God, I felt like I was a good revival. There we are. Thank you both for just the gift that you have and that you keep sharing and giving. Thank you. Eddie Bernice Johnson, the great Congresswoman. And Mark Vesey, we are on his home turf. Thank you for letting me be here. And Colin Allred, where is he? And Colin Allred. And we are all colleagues in the United States Congress. We are also members of the Congressional Black Caucus. And I will tell you, Texas, you are so well represented in the United States Congress with these three. And they're always in these rooms. And, you know, I see them in the rooms where the cameras are and where the cameras are not. And they are always fighting for the people of Texas. They are leaders for Texas, and they are national leaders. And they represent the voice of all people so well. So thank you all. Thank you, thank you. So listen, today is the last day of early voting in Texas. And you all have been doing your thing. What did I hear? Was it 9 million people have voted so far? Early voting in Texas, 9 million? Now, we know this is no time to let up on the pedal, though, right? So I know people sent me pictures of standing in line at midnight this morning, I guess, last night, waiting to vote. There was a line. People are committed. And so today is the last day of early voting in Texas. We want to make sure we see it through. And then let's make sure on Election Day, everybody we know has made sure that their voice, their powerful voice, is represented in this election through their vote. Because there is so much at stake and so many reasons to vote. You know, just think about it. Right now in our country, we are in the middle of at least 4 obvious crises, right? There's the crisis that is a public health crisis that has caused over 215, I think now over 220,000 people to die in just the last several months. And the tragedy of it is so many, because of the nature of this pandemic, spent their last hours on earth without even the benefit of holding the hand and touching someone they love. Maybe communicating through a video, but without the warmth of the family around them. 8.5 million, almost 9 million people have contracted this virus with untold long-term consequences. You know, doctors are talking about things like lung scarring. It will, by the way, at this point, most likely qualify as a pre-existing condition, which means on top of the numbers that we know, the disproportionate numbers in terms of African Americans and Latinos for high blood pressure and diabetes, we're now looking at this. Let's look at the racial disparities on this virus. African Americans and Latinos are 3 times as likely to contract the disease and twice as likely to die from it. the tragedy of the loss of human life. You know, I've been referring to this as one of the greatest mass casualty events that we've experienced since World War II. The tragedy of it. And here's why I bring it up, guys. It didn't have to be this bad. It didn't have to be this bad. Just think about it. Thanks to a fellow by the name of Bob Woodward, we know that the President of the United States was informed back on January 28th about the seriousness of this virus, informed that it is 5 times as likely to kill people as the flu, was informed that it would hurt people of every age, was informed that it is airborne. And he sat on that information. He called it a hoax. He suggested that on his ledger of who people are, you're on one side of his ledger if you wear a mask, you're on the other side of his ledger if you don't. And can you imagine, as parents, as teachers, as small business owners, what you might have done if on January 28th you had known what the President of the United States had known? What you might have done to prepare, knowing that even before this pandemic, far too many Americans were working 2 and 3 jobs to try and pay the rent and put food on the table. And by the way, in Joe Biden and my America, nobody should work more than 1 job to have to put food on the table and pay the rent. But what folks might have done to prepare, knowing that most working families don't have even $1,000 in savings. What people might have done to prepare, small business owners, workers. Because you see, still, even before this pandemic, which has been highlighted, we have a country that has not made it a national priority for working people to have paid sick leave and paid family leave. That will change in a Biden-Harris administration. But what people might have done to prepare teachers and students and parents around the fact that their children are going to miss so much of these critical days of their education. What people might have done to prepare to just simply buy a couple extra rolls of toilet paper. But they sat on this information and they didn't tell anybody. And now we are looking at a situation where in the midst of a public health pandemic, you also have a situation where we have a president who, while we are seeing spikes around our country, talking about we've turned the corner, continuing to mislead the American people. So there are clear choices in this election. Because on the one hand, you have Joe Biden, who together with President Barack Obama created Obamacare, which brought health care to over 20 million people and protected people with pre-existing conditions and understood that health care and access to health care should be a right and not just a privilege of those who can afford it. Joe Biden, who says we will expand on the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, we will extend protections, we will bring down the cost of prescription drugs, we will bring down the cost of premiums, we will lower Medicare eligibility to age 60, we will expand health care, understanding the body doesn't just start from the neck down, it includes the neck up, and we need to expand mental health care. Clear choices. Because you see, on the other hand, you have Donald Trump, who together with his boy, Bill Barr, are in the United States Supreme Court right now trying to sue to get rid of the Affordable Care Act, which again brought health care to so many people. Here in Texas, we're looking at 10 million Texans who have pre-existing conditions. If they are successful with that lawsuit, all of the folks who have over 20 million people are likely to lose their protections. And we now have almost 9 million people who have new pre-existing conditions called COVID. There are clear choices in this election. Because of this pandemic, the worsening of the wealth gap in America has been such that over 30 million people in just the last several months had to file for unemployment insurance. We are seeing numbers that tell us 1 in 5 mothers who has a child under the age of 12 is describing her children as being hungry. Here in Texas, we're looking at the numbers that tell us that 1 in 8 households is describing their household as having been hungry. We're in the middle of a hunger crisis in America. They're not covering it enough. We're in the middle of a hunger crisis. Here in Texas, 1 in 6 households has described not being able to pay their rent or being concerned that they cannot pay their rent next month. Here in Texas, 1 in 4 small businesses has gone out of business. And let's be clear, across America, almost 50% of the workforce either owns a small business or runs a small business. We are looking at an economic devastation that is being compared to the Great Depression. And on the one hand, you have Joe Biden, who says, you want to ask me about the economy and how it's doing, then you need to tell me how working people are doing. How are families doing in America? Which is why Joe Biden is committed to not raising taxes ever on anyone making less than $400,000 a year, lowering middle-class taxes, also making sure that no working family pays more than 7% of your income in child care, making sure there's a $15,000 tax credit for first-time home buyers, understanding that is the way that we have intergenerational wealth in America, is to allow people to own a home. That's how Joe Biden thinks of the economy. On the other hand, you have Donald Trump, who, when asked, how's the economy doing, he will ask, well, how's the stock market doing? He asks, how are rich people doing? As one of his first orders of business, he passed a tax code benefiting the top 1% and the biggest corporations in America. Well, let me tell you, Joe Biden and I, if we win, are about to get rid of that and invest that money in working people in America. Invest that money in building back up our infrastructure, our roads and our bridges and renewable energy, creating millions of jobs. Investing that money in making sure that our students coming from families that make less than $125,000 go to public universities tuition free, including HBCUs, including private HBCUs. Ensuring that our students, when they graduate, if they take on a life of service and public service and a job that pays less than $125,000, that their debt will be erased. That's how we'll invest that money, in the American people. Crises. We are facing a long overdue reckoning on the issue of racial injustice in America. And there are clear choices. On the one hand, you have Joe Biden, who is a student of American history and has the courage to speak the phrase, Black Lives Matter. A Joe Biden who understands that we need to deal with these racial disparities. We need to acknowledge them, difficult though they may be, to think about, much less talk about. We need to address it in terms of what we're doing around health care. We need to address it in terms of the racial wealth gap. We need to address it in terms of the gaps in our education system. Joe Biden says, let's deal with it by putting $150 billion into low-interest loans for minority businesses, black and brown businesses, which tend to be the economic lifeblood of the community. Joe Biden says, let's deal with it in terms of a criminal justice system that must be held accountable for those disparities. Let's get rid of mandatory minimums. Let us decriminalize marijuana and expunge the record of the people who have been convicted for marijuana offenses. Let's shut down the private prisons. Let's get rid of cash bail, understanding people are sitting in jail for weeks, months, and years simply because they can't afford to get out, which makes it an economic justice issue as much as it is a criminal justice issue. And on the other hand, you have Donald Trump, who on a debate stage 2 debates ago refused to condemn white supremacists and then doubled down and said they should stand back and stand by. Donald Trump, because you got to understand this is a pattern, who, when running for office and even before, had the gall to question and challenge the legitimacy of America's first black president. The commander-in-chief of the United States, who, when asked about the tragedy in Charlottesville, where peaceful protesters were protesting racial injustice, and a young woman was killed. And then on the other side, there were neo-Nazis wearing swastikas, carrying tiki torches, hurling racial and anti-Semitic epithets. The commander-in-chief said there were fine people on both sides. A president of the United States who has called Mexicans rapists and criminals, who as his first order of business instituted a Muslim ban. America, we deserve better. That does not reflect who we are as our values and priorities, as a nation that knows we are our strongest when we are unified, knows that we have so much more in common, regardless of where you live, the race, your ethnicity, the language your grandmother speaks. We know we have so much more in common, and we have a choice in this election to elect a Joe Biden who says we are, as a first order of priority, going to unify our country and bring us back together as a nation who values the importance of giving each other respect and dignity. Clear choices in this election. Not to mention the other crisis we are facing, which is a climate crisis. Texas, you know that well. You look at what's going on around our country. Up and down the West Coast, you know, I'm from California, up and down the West Coast, California up to Washington, over to Colorado, wildfires that are burning out whole communities. I've met families that are being evacuated or have been evacuated, never to return to their home. Firefighters who were fighting fires while their own homes were burning. My brother-in-law's a firefighter. Tragedies. You look at the Gulf Coast states, our neighbors to Texas, being battered by these storms. There have been now 5 named storms just this year. And you know they name a storm because it's really bad. So Zeta being the last one, the most recent. In the Midwest, you're seeing floods that have caused farmers to lose a whole season of crops. Joe Biden says we need to deal with this with a sense of urgency. We must embrace the science on this. We cannot play politics on this. And we see that in this moment of opportunity to have timelines, understanding we must deal with this with a sense of urgency, that we also have the opportunity to grow our economy and create jobs. Joe sees the opportunity in the moment to invest in renewable energies, to invest in the apprenticeship programs with the folks like the building trades, knowing that we have a moment of opportunity to invest in America's auto industry and be the best in the world in production of electric vehicles. All of these are opportunities to meet a moment of crisis if you are a real leader. And on the other hand, you have the current president of the United States, who, when he was asked about the wildfires in California, so he was asked by a journalist, and the question was something like, well, you know, Mr. President, these wildfires are happening, and scientists are telling us there's a real connection, you know, between the climate, the extreme changes, and human behaviors that are contributing to that, and what do you have to say? The President of the United States, who is also, again, the Commander-in-Chief, responded, "Science doesn't know." As though science is a person. Can you believe science doesn't know? So, you know, and there's a through theme here, too, because, right, that's how he's been treating the coronavirus, right? A refusal to embrace the people who are smart enough to know what is actually going on and give us some direction around how we need to deal with it, instead of trying to make everybody think everything's okay, as though people aren't smart enough to see what is happening around them. So all these things are at play, and so much more. And that brings me to this moment, where we are today. I'm here in Texas to thank you for all you have been doing to speak up about these challenges and to remind people to vote here on the last day of early voting, 4 days before the end of the election. And I'm here to talk about it in the context of also understanding that there's a lot that we need to get done, and there are a lot of reasons for folks to vote. And, you know, people ask me a lot, why should I vote? Does it matter? And I think there are 3 reasons that it is important that people vote. One is to honor the ancestors. Honor the ancestors. I mean, you know, Bernice, Mark, we all know we lost an incredible American human, just a hero, in Congressman John Lewis. Just a hero. He is now among the ancestors. John Lewis, who shed his blood on that Edmund Pettus Bridge. John Lewis, who said to us, "Get in good trouble." John Lewis, who lived a life that was about a commitment to fighting for equal rights and civil rights. And it was a fight that was born out of being a patriot and loving our country, knowing the best way we achieve our ideals is to fight for those ideals, to do it in every way by standing up, showing up, and speaking up. So we must vote to honor the ancestors. This year, we celebrated the 19th Amendment, the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment. The ancestors, the suffragettes, who those 100 years ago, in all of their white, were marching and shouting for a woman's right to vote, saying, "We will not be deterred, we will not be left behind." Now, let us remember, because we always must speak truth about history, that black women couldn't vote until 1965. So we have to remember that. But yes, it is important to honor those who fought for this precious right, understanding that, like Coretta Scott King told us, the fight for civil rights, for equal rights, for human rights, this fight for justice must be fought and won with each generation. And what she meant is it is precious, these rights, but you cannot take them for granted. We must be vigilant. So we vote to honor the ancestors. We vote because everything is at stake. Everything is at stake. Like, let's think about where we are. We talked about it in terms of these crises. I mean, let's talk about it in terms of these 545 babies who right now have been orphaned because of a failure of the United States government to reunify them with their parents. Let's talk about a nation under this administration that had a policy of separating children from their parents at the border. A nation that broke its promise to the dreamers in terms of not following through on a commitment around DACA protections. There are so many things at stake. So that is a reason to vote. And the third reason is this. So I'm traveling the country, and I've been to, in the last week and a half, in fact, I'm going back to Florida tomorrow, Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, Michigan, I mean, you just name it, okay? And one of the things that we have been seeing, certainly since 2013, before for sure, but since 2013 when the Supreme Court gutted the Voting Rights Act, is we've been seeing as many as 24 states putting in place laws through their state legislature that have been designed to suppress the vote, have been designed to make it difficult for people to vote, have been done in such a way, you've seen that in Texas where they're trying to remove the drop boxes, where they're trying to reduce the number of polls, where they're saying if you vote from home, you need to fill out 2 envelopes. I mean, all kinds of things, right? Leaders who are trying to make it difficult and confusing and to suggest you can't trust the process. In fact, at that first debate, the President of the United States took that stage in front of 70 million Americans and, in my opinion, openly encouraged a suppression of the vote. Not to mention what he's doing and what they're doing to mess with the post office. The post office. The best people in the world work for the post office. The post office. So we have to ask, why do we think so many powerful people are going out of their way to make it so difficult and confusing for us to vote? And I think the answer is because they know our power. They know our power. They know when we vote, things change. They know when we vote, we win. So let us not let anyone ever take our power from us. Let us use the power of our strong voices every day in the spirit of John Lewis, in the spirit of the suffragettes, in the spirit of all of the generations of people here and in the future who are counting on us to know what is at stake and to step up and to stand up and to fight for this country we love. That is what is before us. And so my final point is this. This moment will pass. It will pass. And years from now, our children and our grandchildren and others, they will look at us, each one of us. They're going to look in our eyes, and they will ask us, where were you at that moment? And you see, we're going to be able to tell them so much more than just how we felt. Fort Worth, we will tell them what we did. We will tell them what we did. We will tell them on this particular Friday afternoon, on the last day of early voting in Texas, we were sitting in a field hanging out with Kamala. We will tell them we texted everybody, called everybody, emailed everybody we knew. That yes, we knew we were kind of getting on their nerves, but we also knew they'd get over it. That we reminded people of the path that we are on, that the shoulders upon which we stand, that we reminded people about what is at stake, and that we reminded people about their power. And in this moment where we are dealing with crises, we reminded our friends and our neighbors and our family that you are not alone. Don't let anyone make you feel small. That you are big, you are strong, you have power, and at election time that power will be through your vote, and you will tell them when they ask that you elected Joe Biden, the President of the United States. Thank you for